Is budgeting and negotiating based in a lack mentality or an abundant mentality? You're going to hear the truth on this show. One of the biggest questions I get when I talk about abundance, especially in a seminar or something, is people will say, why do I need to have a budget, excuse me, or negotiate if there is an abundance? And I understand that when a person is not really completely understanding the idea of an abundance and applying all the laws to it, our mind can go to a place like, well, if there's really an abundance, like I can spend whatever I want and the money will always be there. Now, so here's the truth. Here's what we have to understand about this. Yes, there's an abundance, but there's also cause and effect. So we have to understand how cause and effect plays into the idea of an abundance. And it applies how it applies to how we're experiencing our life. So actually, it's the reverse. So this is the part that I want you to think about first. If we don't want to look at money, we have to ask ourselves, why don't we want to look at it? When I mean don't look at it, when we don't want to run our life on a budget, our life or our business, that is actually coming from a place of fear. That's coming from a place of not wanting to look at what we don't have or not wanting to look at what we do have and then structuring our life to live within those means. But see, this is the part that we're taught where there's kind of like a little bit of a lie in here, but we're going to get to it. So here's what this is. Most people are taught to live within their means, meaning that here's how much you earn, and that you budget that money and you learn to live within that framework. So you're making, say, so much money a month, and so much of it has to go to rent or a mortgage or housing, and then you have a car, and you have travel, and you have food, and you have health care. You have all the expenses of life, in other words, and we have to be able to meet all those expenses, and we have to keep those expenses within the amount of money that we're making. So that means that if we want to have more of something in our life, then something needs to go, or we need to increase the amount of income. So one of the things that I teach people is to how to increase their income to whatever level that they want it to be, to live whatever kind of life that they want. And they will say, well, doesn't that mean that I don't have to live on a budget anymore? No, it doesn't mean that. But it's what the budget is in this case is it's not reactive to your life, but it's actually proactive to your life. So it is, first of all, a person deciding how they want to live their life, how they want to run their business, how much is it going to take to do that, learning the skill sets and the strategies to be able to create the amount of money to do that, and then directing that money with a budget to the things that keep creating that money to do that. Most people are taught, here's how much money you make, adjust your life just to that. I'm saying, look at your life, figure out how you want to live it. I don't care how extravagant it is, and then learn the skill sets to be able to earn the money to do that, but also learn how to budget it so that it continues to bring in the abundance, the wealth, the resources that you want to be able to live the life that you want to live. Negotiation plays into this role in the way that basically this, that prices are predetermined by individuals, agreements are predetermined by individuals that are in business, so that, well, hopefully, so that they can make a profit. But in some cases, it's also created with the idea in mind that people are going to negotiate, and they put room in there for negotiation. So there's a lot of different things in the industry that I'm part of where we have to negotiate all the time because there's so many different factors at play. Now, I'll give you, for instance, with this. When we rent a hotel space to do a seminar. So hotels have different ways of making money that people aren't aware of. And one of it is in the seminar or the convention business. And in the seminar and the convention business, they make only so much on the rooms that are actually rented there. they make a lot more on the food and alcohol that is sold to the people that are in those rooms. So when we negotiate, say, a ballroom, we also have to usually make a commitment to how many room nights that people are going to stay in the hotel. There is a minimum of food and beverage that we have to be willing to purchase ahead of time to cover the cost of that, so that they actually are making money on that, and then that'll determine whether or not we get the room for free or we have to pay anything for it. But in some cases they'll charge you for the pens in the room, the paper in the room, the water in the room, coffee. Like if you have coffee and tea at an event, they may charge you just for how long you're going to have it, how much quantity you're going to use, how many times they come out and refill it. All of that has to be negotiated so that you understand this. How much money is it costing you to put this event on? And that's just the space. Forget, that doesn't even include the marketing and the man hours that go in from my business to have to bring the people to the room. This is just the room itself, just the venue. How much is that going to cost? And then how many people at what dollar price does it take for you to be able to pay for it? And then what are you going to sell there that actually then contributes to a profit? So so the negotiation happens because you really understand your numbers and you're coming from a place of abundance. You want to make sure that you come out on the end of having more money than when you went in. If you don't want to negotiate, you just take prices at face value. You have no way of knowing if you're going to come out profitable in your business or not. So abundance is not just the amount of money that it's out there, but it's also an abundant mindset where we're constantly creating strategies and things that we do from a cause and effect perspective to make sure that there's always an abundance flowing in our life. If you look at something basic, like there's an old story about the idea that God gave us the world and the abundance of the world and all the abundance of everything that's in it. But God didn't take the trees and the mud and the rocks and the water and everything and turn it into the properties that would actually build us a house. Our intelligence had to figure out how to do that. It had to figure out, how do we do this in a way where we can create sustainable living? It didn't take the ground and work the soil and turn it into a farm that produced fruits and vegetables and livestock in order for us to be able to eat, and cotton and other fibers to create clothes. Like, we had to figure out how to be good stewards of all of this stuff to extract the abundance out of the universe. The universe does not operate on the individual aspect of cause and effect. The human being operates on the individual aspect of cause and effect. We can't ever forget that. Number one, most people need to learn it to start off with, but then once we learn it, we can't ever forget it, because it's literally what creates the abundance that we live in, the quality of our life, how we're expanding the world. Are we doing things that are good for us globally, economically, from a resource perspective in the world? Because yes, there is an abundance. However, if you don't understand the law of cause and effect, and you use your abundance at the wrong time, it's not that the thing that you want is not there. You may not be in the place where that thing is that you need. Let me give you an idea of what we're talking about here. So, in many parts of the world, there are 4 seasons. And during one of those seasons, like say summer, say spring and summer, that's the season of growth, right? So that is when food is growing. That's when animals are growing. That's when things are abundantly growing. And then we go into a fall period where all of that stuff comes to the fulfillment of its growth. And then we have a harvest season where we're able to collect that abundance. So our job is to understand how much of that abundance we're going to need to make it through the dormant season, which we call winter. So winter is a season where everything is basically in a hibernation. for a short period of time. But if we're going to exist in an abundant way, we have to make sure that we have saved abundantly. We have to make sure that we have managed abundantly. We had to have an abundant way of thinking to get through this downtime. Now, the other thing is this, that not every part of the world is in the same dormant season at the same time. So while you may be in a part of the world where things are dormant for a while, there's an abundance in another part of the world. If you don't know that, and you don't have the ability to get there, and you didn't abundantly save, then you're abundantly in trouble. Like, there's always an abundance. It's what part of the abundance are you experiencing because of your knowledge of cause and effect, and how good of a steward were you over the cause and effect. We can't escape that. Like, we don't escape the law of cause and effect. So I think what ends up happening is that when we're starting to learn principles of abundance from a spiritual nature, from a universal nature, from a wrong and right nature, from the nature of money and how much money there is in the world and how we can live and all of this, a lot of what we believe before we start to study, before we start to understand these principles, is based in fear. And the problem is that from an ignorance standpoint, we don't understand just how much of what we believe is, number one, not true, and how much of it is in fear. And I found out very early in my career, or even with myself, when I think about it, in the beginning, I really was really poor at managing my money because I did not like to look at there not having enough there. I didn't want to be told that I couldn't spend money. I didn't want to know that there wasn't enough there. So it intimidated me. I didn't learn how to manage it well. And I had to learn how to do that so I was no longer afraid of money. I was no longer afraid of how to bring money in. I was also no longer afraid of how to spend money and do it in a way where there was always an abundance. Then you get to the idea of, what you spend your money on. Is what you spending your money on creating more abundance in your life, or is it creating less abundance in your life? Some things we buy appreciate in value and bring us more money and more abundance. Some things we buy don't appreciate in value and they actually lose their value. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't have things that lose their value. That's not what it means at all. What it means is that you have to understand the difference and know how much money you need to bring in overall so that you can spend money on whatever it is that you want. But if you're afraid of money, you won't sit down and actually figure these things out. So when I ask a person, and you can ask yourself this question, do you know how much it takes for you to live every month the way that you currently live? And pretty much right down to the penny. Like, everybody should have a solid idea of how much their bills are every month. If you don't know that, right, you have to ask yourself, why don't I know that? And generally, for those of you that don't know the answer to that question, it's because in some way, when you look at your bills every month and you compare it to your bank account, it doesn't make you feel good. It induces fear in some way. If you don't have 100% control over the amount of money that you make, and generally for people that are working for someone else, if you've never went out and really earned your own money, you know that your security is kind of relative to wherever it is that you're working, meaning that you're slightly vulnerable to whatever happens to the company that you're working for, or to whether or not you do a good job, or if somebody likes you and they want to get rid of you or not. These are real vulnerabilities that we have in life. When you're raised with that kind of a vulnerability, it spills over, and it may not be something that we talk about a whole lot, but under the surface, we know that it's there. And it makes us feel vulnerable. And it also creates all kinds of fears that we live in. So then people start not wanting to pay attention to things. their anxiety builds up. They start doing things out of like anxiety, like spending more because in the moment, if they spend more, it makes them feel good, or over saving because if they spend, it scares the hell out of them. So they're not spending enough on their life or in the right direction. And it creates a lot of chaos in the mind. So then if a person starts to learn how to make a lot of money, they may automatically assume when they hear this law of abundance that, oh, well, there's an abundance, so I don't need to be afraid anymore that the money isn't there or that it won't be there. The idea of the abundance is to give you the idea of how do we live abundantly, not just that there's an abundant storehouse of resources that we can pull from without the effect, understanding the law of cause and effect. And that if we do the wrong causes, we're going to experience effects that we don't want, even though there's an abundance. We have to make sure we really get that straight in our mind because it's very, very true. So what does that mean? It means that you have to start off with the premise of how do you want to live your life? Then you have to do the homework and find out what is it going to cost me on a monthly basis, an annual basis, a weekly basis, to live the life that I want to live. You should live the life that you want to live in every aspect. Like, you don't need to put any limits on that. Live the life that you want to live, but find out how much it's going to cost you. Then you say, what do I have to learn to bring in the amount of money, actually more than the amount of money that I need to live that way, so that I can also save money. I can also invest money that works for me. I can invest in resources that pay me back, so that I have more money that is causing more money to come into my life, and I'm not spending all of my money on things that cause all of my money to leave my life. Because the only way I know how to bring money in is by doing the one or two things that I've learned that allow me to bring money into my life. Negotiating is also being an extremely good steward over the money and giving it the proper direction so that it can grow more money for you. And because let's face it, there are people out there that will take advantage of a situation. They will take advantage of an ignorant buyer every day of the week. And what's unfortunate is that it's true, and there's a lot more people out there that will do this than not do this. So you also have to be aware of what you're spending it on, making sure that you're getting a fair deal for what it is that you're doing, and making sure that you're spending money in a direction that is going to enhance your life in every single way to the best of your ability that you can actually do that. That means you have to be informed, you have to be knowledgeable, you have to be educated, you have to be willing to look at what you have, you have to be looking at what you don't have, you have to be looking at how do I get better at bringing money into my life? How do I create more resourcefulness in my life? How do I create more abundance in my life? Notice I keep using the word create here because you're creating it. It's cause and effect. If you're going to experience the abundance, you have to create the causes for the abundance to move into your life. And you also have to be very cautious, very knowledgeable, very informed about the effects that you create in your life where the money can go out. If those become bigger than the causes to come in, you're not living in abundance. The only reason that would happen is because you're not actually coming from abundant thinking. Every single time I see someone in a situation where more is going out than is actually coming in, one of two things are at play: ignorance or fear or both. That's it. So knowing that, you know what it is to correct. If you start going, if there's really is an abundance, then why do I need to have a budget, or why do I need to negotiate? That is coming from lack thinking, not abundant thinking. That is coming from fear, not abundant thinking. Fear tells you don't look at any of the money that's going in, because then you're going to worry about it. Worrying about it is not, so you can look at your money and be a good steward of it, not worry about it, because you understand how to think abundantly and how to think critically based on cause and effect to bring it in. being a good steward of it is not worry. It is a discipline of abundance. It is a practice of abundance that will allow money to continue to come into your life on a regular basis. But remember, we were given the ability to choose. So how we live this life, how we experience it, how much money comes in, how much money goes out, what does the money do for us while we have it? What do we choose to do with it? All of that is our choice. All of these things are here for us to use, but based on our choice and the level of education that we get around this, or the level of ignorance that we choose to allow in our life, determines the outcome. Because that in itself becomes the cause and effect of how we're going to experience our days here on earth. So never throw the laws up there as some magical thing that is going to allow you to escape responsibility or the understanding of cause and effect to live your life to the greatest amount of abundance that you can experience. That is here. It is here for you to use, but you have to become educated. You have to become informed. You have to become disciplined. You have to make decisions. You have to understand cause and effect in order to live that way. I hope you got a lot out of this. I will talk to you very soon. Have a great day. Hey, everybody. Thanks for watching. Make sure you like and subscribe. Talk to you soon.